Softly, we enter this quiet place of reflection, letting the world fall away as if gently set aside by a loving hand. We breathe slowly, letting the weight of the day drift like dust in a warm beam of evening light. And in this stillness, we remember Elijah, a man of God whose heart once trembled with fear so deep it felt like it might swallow him whole. A man who, after standing boldly on Mount Carmel, after calling down fire from heaven, suddenly found himself running for his life, overwhelmed, exhausted, and unraveling beneath the pressure of everything he carried. And we remember that Scripture does not hide this moment from us, for God wanted us to see that even His strongest servants sometimes shake, sometimes crumble, sometimes fall into the shadows and whisper that they cannot go on. Yet in Elijah's story, hidden tenderly beneath his panic, we find the gentle heartbeat of God, steady and patient, meeting him not with rebuke or anger, but with presence and care, with nourishment, rest, whisper-soft guidance, and the reassurance that even in our most frightened moments, we are not abandoned, not forgotten, not disqualified from His love. So let us settle into this story, letting each word smooth the rough edges of our thoughts, allowing the Spirit to comfort the tired places within us. Picture Elijah fleeing into the wilderness, his feet heavy upon the sand, his breath uneven, his mind racing with dread and confusion. He had seen miracles, yes, but he had also seen threats rise like towering waves above him. He felt hunted, cornered, and suddenly painfully human. He wandered away from everyone and everything he knew until he collapsed beneath a broom tree, wishing the journey of his life could simply end. The prophet of fire, the messenger of miracles, whispering that he could not bear another step. And perhaps you know that feeling too, when even your faith feels tired, when the road feels too long, when the pressures of life weigh heavier than your strength can hold. But in that wilderness, in that trembling place, God did not leave Elijah alone. Instead, the Lord sent an angel who touched him gently, as someone might wake a child who had cried themselves into sleep, offering him bread baked on hot stones, offering him cool water, offering him rest without shame and nourishment without judgment. The wilderness around him was silent, but the care of God was not. The angel returned a second time, as though to say, "You are not finished. You are not forgotten. You are not alone." And with that gentle provision, Elijah rose and walked to Horeb, the mountain of God. There, in a cave carved from ancient stone, alone in the quiet vastness, Elijah poured out his weary heart before the Lord, and God, in His tender wisdom, did not correct the trembling prophet harshly. He invited him deeper. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" the Lord asked, not because He lacked knowledge, but because He wanted Elijah to release the burden he carried, to let the fear be spoken out loud. And then God revealed Himself, not in the roaring wind that tore the mountains apart, not in the violent earthquake that shook the ground, not in the blazing fire that scorched the sky, but in a gentle whisper, a still, small voice, a breath of divine quietness that slipped softly into Elijah's soul. The God of thunder came in a whisper to calm a trembling heart. And maybe you too have known nights when the wind feels loud, when the ground beneath your hope feels like it's shifting, when fires of stress burn hot around you. Maybe you've known moments when even prayer feels thin, and your courage feels fragile, and your mind echoes with anxious thoughts that do not seem to stop. But Elijah's story reminds us that God does not shout over our fear. He speaks into it. He draws near with the gentleness of someone who understands the fragility of human hearts. And even when we panic, even when we run, even when we whisper, "I can't do this anymore," God comes close, steady as breath, soft as grace, present as the sunrise. And he whispers direction, hope, reassurance, reminding us that there is still purpose, still meaning, still guidance for the next step. So let your heart rest here in this sacred quiet, knowing that the same God who met Elijah in his trembling meets you now, not demanding strength you do not have, but offering peace for your spirit, rest for your mind, and gentle companionship for your journey. Breathe slowly, letting his nearness wrap around you like a warm blanket in the cool desert night, letting his whisper settle where the panic has echoed. For he is here, and he is patient, and he is kind, and he will walk with you through every wilderness place until fear loosens its grip and hope rises softly again. Elijah remained on the mountain, the quiet curling around him like a tender embrace, and in that soft silence, the Lord continued to strengthen him. No thunder rolled, no lightning split the sky, only the gentle persistence of God's nearness. And as Elijah breathed in that holy stillness, something in him began to settle, the frantic beating of his thoughts easing as though the very presence of the Lord was smoothing the tangled threads inside his soul. Sometimes healing comes not in sudden leaps, but in slow breaths, in sacred pauses, in the careful unwinding of fear. And God was doing this for Elijah, piece by piece, moment by moment, letting him rest, letting him listen, letting him feel seen and held in the hidden places where panic had once shaken him. And God spoke again, softly but firmly, giving Elijah direction for the road ahead. He told him that his journey was not over, that there were kings to anoint and a successor to mentor, that there was purpose still unfolding before him. But these instructions were not burdens. They were gentle guideposts, reminders that Elijah's life was still woven into God's great story. Sometimes, the most comforting thing God can say is simply that there is more ahead, that our exhaustion is not the end, that our fear cannot cancel the calling he placed upon us. And Elijah, once trembling beneath a lonely tree, now received from God a renewed sense of meaning, not because he suddenly felt strong, but because God remained steady when he could not. And so Elijah left the mountain, his steps still tender, his heart still healing, yet carrying within him the quiet assurance that God was walking with him. And as he traveled, the Lord led him to Elisha, a young man plowing in a field, unaware that God had chosen him for a destiny that would intertwine with Elijah's own. When Elijah cast his mantle over Elisha's shoulders, a new companionship began, gentle, steady, God-ordained. It was as though the Lord knew Elijah needed someone beside him, someone to share the journey, someone to remind him that no prophet, no believer, no weary soul was ever meant to walk alone. And perhaps you too have known seasons when God placed someone quietly in your path at the exact moment your strength felt thin, a friend, a counselor, a family member, a gentle presence whose kindness felt like divine timing. For God still sends help in human form, still weaves hearts together to lift one another when fear feels heavy. Elijah and Elisha walked the dusty paths side by side, their footsteps carrying not only the weight of prophetic calling, but also the comfort of shared purpose. And in the companionship God provided, Elijah's anxious heart found space to breathe, to continue, to keep living out the mission entrusted to him. And maybe that is God's whisper to you tonight, that you do not have to carry everything alone, that he can bring people to your side, that he can hold you steady through his presence and through the gentle hands of those who love you. And that even when your mind feels overwhelmed and your heart feels fragile, his strength remains a shelter around you. As days passed, Elijah witnessed again the faithful guidance of the Lord. He saw God move, speak, provide, lead, and with each moment, the memory of that panicked flight into the wilderness grew softer, no longer a mark of failure, but a testimony of God's tenderness. Because the truth is this: God does not define us by our weakest moments. He does not measure us by the days when fear outweighed courage. In fact, He meets us there, right there, where we are trembling and tired and unsure, and He gently lifts us, nourishes us, whispers to us, and leads us forward. Elijah's story is not one of shame, but one of restoration, proof that even the strongest believers can feel undone, and still God's compassion remains complete. And maybe tonight your heart needs that reminder that it is okay to feel anxious, it is okay to feel overwhelmed, it is okay to feel tired in ways you cannot easily explain. Even Elijah, the prophet of fire, the man who called down flames from heaven, felt the weight of fear and sorrow press him to the ground. And yet God held him with care so tender it still echoes through Scripture. He will hold you, too, in your quiet moments, in your restless thoughts, in your weary breaths. So breathe deeply now, letting the truth of God's compassion wash over you. Let your shoulders drop, let your thoughts slow, let your spirit soften into this space of holy rest. God is with you in every trembling moment, guiding you softly, speaking to you tenderly, strengthening you quietly, just as He did for Elijah. And though the night may feel long, His light is near. Though your thoughts may race, His peace is within reach. Though your heart may feel tired, His love is patient and constant. Rest in Him now, for He is here, whispering still. Elijah continued walking through the days God gave him, each sunrise another gentle reminder that the Lord had not abandoned him in the wilderness of fear. And as he moved forward, there was a quiet change taking place within him, something soft and steady, like the gradual warming of the desert ground as morning light touches it. Not a sudden burst of strength, not an abrupt surge of confidence, but a slow, sacred healing that comes only from being held by God. And in this tender transformation, we see that restoration is often quieter than we expect. It takes root in silence, grows in rest, blooms in the unseen places where God tends to our souls with patient hands. There were moments when Elijah still remembered the trembling, the panic, the breathless fear that once overtook him beneath the broom tree. He remembered the heaviness in his chest, the sense that life had become too much, the feeling that everything inside him was unraveling. But those memories no longer carried the same sting. They had become something different now, not reminders of weakness, but reminders of divine compassion, because he knew, deeply, unshakably, that God had met him in that fragile place, not with disappointment but with tenderness. The bread baked on stones, the cool water, the angelic touch, the whisper on the mountain. Each moment a quiet testimony that God is nearer in our weakness than in our victories. And sometimes in your own life, the healing God is giving you will unfold this same way, not in dramatic leaps, but in gentle moments of comfort. A peaceful breath, a word of encouragement, a night of restful sleep after many restless ones, the easing of anxious thoughts, the calm that slowly returns like soft waves upon the shore. And though the process may seem slow, it is holy, for God is not rushing you. He is not impatient with your healing. He walks with you at the pace of your breath, at the rhythm of your heart, at the gentle speed of grace. As Elijah continued his ministry, he saw God move in ways that reminded him again and again that the Lord's strength is made perfect not in our certainty, but in our dependence. And Elijah's renewed journey teaches us that life after fear is possible. that anxiety does not disqualify us from purpose, that panic does not push us outside the boundaries of God's love. Instead, these moments become places where we learn the depth of His compassion, the softness of His voice, the way He wraps us in peace when our world feels like it is shaking. Elisha stayed near him, a quiet companion whose presence alone must have brought comfort. And sometimes healing happens simply because someone walks beside us, listens without judgment, shares the burdens we can no longer carry alone. God knew Elijah needed someone, and He knows when you need someone too. He knows when your heart needs help, when your soul needs companionship, when your mind needs relief. And He can send people, unexpected, gentle, faithful people, who become reminders of His care in human form. If your life has such people, let gratitude rise softly within you. And if you are waiting for them, trust that God knows how to bring them into your story in the perfect moment. As Elijah aged, there came a time when the Lord would call him home in a way both wondrous and mysterious. A chariot of fire, horses of flame, a whirlwind lifting him from earth to heaven. Yet even in this dramatic end, the tenderness of God remained. For Elisha was there beside him, watching with love, receiving the mantle Elijah had once placed upon him. And Elijah, who once believed his journey should end beneath a lonely tree, discovered that God had written a far more beautiful ending for him than his fear had ever imagined. And so it is with you. Your story is not over when anxiety whispers that it is. Your journey is not finished when fear tells you it cannot continue. God holds the pen, not your panic, and the chapters He still intends to write are filled with grace, purpose, comfort, and hope you have yet to feel. So rest now in this truth. Breathe slowly and deeply, letting God's presence settle into the spaces where worry has lived. Let your heart quiet in the knowledge that the one who cared for Elijah cares for you with the same gentleness, the same patience, the same unwavering love. You are not alone in your fear. You are not forgotten in your exhaustion. The God who sees you, knows you, and holds you is near, whispering softly to your trembling heart, and He will stay with you through every valley, every shadow, every sleepless night, every anxious breath, until peace returns like dawn spreading across the mountains, gentle and certain, carrying light into every corner of your soul. Elijah's life, with all its trembling and all its triumph, continued to glow like a lantern in the long corridor of Scripture. And within that gentle light, we see a truth that wraps itself softly around our own weary hearts, that God does not abandon those who falter, that He does not give up on the ones who shake beneath the weight of life, that He does not step away when fear presses hard against the soul. Instead, He draws nearer, closer than breath, holding us with a love that neither storms nor shadows can undo. And Elijah carried this truth with him in the quiet way a healed heart carries its memories, not as wounds that ache, but as reminders of grace that sustained. There were evenings when Elijah sat with Elisha beside small campfires tucked beneath the deep violet sky, the wind sighing gently across the hills. And perhaps in those moments his heart reflected on all he had endured, the victories and the valleys, the miracles and the moments when panic overtook him. And maybe sometimes he closed his eyes and remembered the broom tree, the way exhaustion had folded him to the ground, the way despair had whispered lies into his spirit. But those memories no longer held him hostage, because now they were touched by the warmth of God's presence, reshaped by the tenderness of the one who had restored him. And in this healing, we see a reflection of what God longs to do within us, to take the moments we fear will break us and weave them gently into stories of compassion and redemption. Elijah's footsteps carried him through many more landscapes. Stony ridges, quiet valleys, villages filled with humble people longing to hear the word of the Lord. And each place became another reminder that God still had work for him to do. Small acts of obedience, gentle conversations, prophetic whispers carried on the wind. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, just the slow unfolding of purpose under the soft guidance of a faithful God. And sometimes your own calling unfolds this way too, not in sudden revelations, but in quiet nudges, in peaceful steps, in the calm unfolding of days where God meets you in ordinary moments, whispering comfort, guiding decisions, strengthening your heart little by little. And as Elijah walked this sacred path, surrounded by the hum of creation and the company of one who looked up to him with devotion, there must have been moments when peace settled over him like soft rainfall. Moments when he realized that the God who had whispered on the mountain was whispering still, not always in dramatic signs, but in the gentle steadiness of each day. And this is how God often speaks to us as well, not through roaring winds or shaking ground, but through quiet presence, through subtle reassurance, through the calm that unexpectedly settles into a troubled mind, the kind of peace that slips in softly and fills the spaces where fear once echoed. Elijah's journey was no longer one of frantic running or desperate hiding. It became a path marked by companionship, purpose, and the lingering warmth of God's mercy. And slowly, the once panicked prophet became a man strengthened not by his own resilience, but by the patience and tenderness of the Lord. And this transformation is available to every heart that trembles, to every soul that feels overwhelmed, to every mind that fears the weight of its own thoughts. God is not limited by our fragility. In fact, He moves most gently in the places where we feel most breakable. So, as you rest now, let your spirit be comforted by this truth, that the same God who met Elijah in his darkest moment meets you here tonight, surrounding you with His presence, offering you rest, whispering peace into the corners of your heart where worry has tried to take root. Let His nearness calm your breathing. Let His kindness loosen the grip of anxiety. Let His steady love reassure you that you are safe in His hands. And as you drift into quieter thoughts, imagine the Lord sitting beside you as He once sat near Elijah, unhurried, understanding, endlessly gentle, staying with you until fear softens, until peace rises, until your soul rests in His embrace. Elijah's days continued to unfold like a gentle thread woven through the quiet loom of God's mercy. And as he walked, as he breathed, as he lived out the rest of the path God had set before him, something deep within his spirit rested in a way it never had before. Not because life had grown easier, not because challenges had vanished, but because he carried with him the memory of God's tenderness in the wilderness, the memory of being fed when he felt empty, touched when he felt alone, spoken to when he felt unworthy. And these memories became a soft foundation beneath his feet, reminding him with every step that fear did not have the final word, that panic was not the author of his story, that God held him steady and sure, even when his own heart felt fragile. Sometimes, in the hush of early morning, Elijah would pause beneath the quiet sky, listening to the faint rustling of leaves, the distant call of birds greeting the dawn. And in those sounds he heard the echo of God's whisper, not loud, not forceful, but steady and familiar, like the comforting voice of someone who has never once stopped loving you. And he knew that this whisper was the same voice that had reached him in that cave on Horeb, the same voice that had called him out of despair, the same voice that had breathed purpose back into his weary bones. And in that awareness, a peace deeper than understanding settled over him, soft as morning light on the hills. Elisha walked beside him through those days, learning from him, watching him, absorbing the quiet wisdom that came not just from Elijah's strength, but from his brokenness and healing too. And perhaps Elijah sometimes looked at the young man and felt grateful in ways he could not fully express. Grateful that God had given him a companion, grateful that he did not walk alone anymore, grateful that the Lord had seen his trembling heart and responded not with dismissal, but with divine kindness. And in those moments, Elijah understood that God's care often comes through the presence of others, weaving comfort through shared footsteps, shared prayers, shared silence. And as the season shifted, Elijah grew older, his beard carrying the silver of years, his hands marked with the lines of long journeys and long prayers. Yet his spirit, once shaken by fear, now rested with a gentleness carved from God's faithful nearness. And though he remembered the wilderness, the panic, the collapse beneath the broom tree, those memories had softened like stones polished by a river's flow. They no longer brought a sting of shame. Instead, they brought a quiet awe, because he knew that in that moment of unraveling, God had drawn nearer than ever before, had held him through the dark night of fear, had lifted him with whispers instead of thunder, had restored him not with demands, but with compassion. Elijah's life became a testimony that even the strongest hearts can tremble, that even the most faithful can feel afraid, that even the boldest can have moments when they whisper, "Lord, I can't do this anymore." And yet, God remains, steady, patient, gently mending what fear has frayed. And this is the truth, whispered through the ages to every weary soul who hears Elijah's story, that your panic does not push God away. Your fear does not anger him. Your exhaustion does not disappoint him. He stays, he watches over you. He breathes peace where anxiety tightens your chest. He whispers direction where confusion clouds your thoughts. He offers rest where your strength has faded. So as you lie here now, letting the weight of the day slip softly from your shoulders, imagine the God who comforted Elijah drawing near to you as well. Imagine him sitting quietly beside you, unhurried and endlessly kind. Imagine his presence wrapping around you like a warm blanket in the cool of night. Imagine his whisper settling into your spirit, easing each anxious thought, softening each tight place in your heart. Imagine him reminding you that you are not alone, not forgotten, not expected to carry everything by yourself. For the one who met Elijah in his trembling meets you now, gently, patiently, lovingly, inviting you to rest beneath the shelter of his nearness, inviting your mind to quiet, your breathing to slow, your soul to feel safe once more. And as the night deepens, let these truths cradle you the way God once cradled his weary prophet. Let his love be the ground beneath you. Let his peace be the air around you. Let his whisper be the lullaby that guides you into rest, for he is here, and he is holding you, and he will not let you go. And Elijah's story continued to unfold with the same quiet grace that had followed him since the moment God met him beneath the broom tree. And as he walked through the later years of his life, his heart carried a softness that only comes from having been held by God in the darkest moments. Each sunrise felt like a whispered reminder that the Lord, who sustained him then, was sustaining him still. And though the landscapes around him shifted, dusty roads, shaded valleys, small villages where people greeted him with reverence and hope, Elijah's spirit moved with an ease that had once seemed impossible during the trembling days of panic. For now he knew, deeply and unshakably, that God's presence was not something he had to earn, nor something that could be lost to fear. It was simply there, steady and faithful, like the heartbeat beneath his ribs. There were times when Elijah would sit on a quiet hillside with Elisha nearby, watching the warm glow of dusk settle over the horizon. The air would still, the breeze soft as a sigh, and in that gentle hush, Elijah often felt the nearness of God wrap around him like a familiar cloak. He would close his eyes, not in fear, but in peace, letting the memory of God's whisper settle once more into his spirit. And he knew that the Lord's voice, so tender on Horeb, had followed him ever since, guiding him, comforting him, speaking into the quiet places of his heart, smoothing the remnants of the fear that once overwhelmed him. And he cherished these moments, knowing that every breath he drew was a testament to God's faithfulness. Elisha, still young compared to the seasoned prophet, often watched Elijah with deep admiration, learning not only from the miracles he performed or the prophecies he spoke, but from the gentleness that seemed to flow from him now, a gentleness born not of weakness, but of having met God in the valley of fear. And Elijah, noticing the watchful eyes of the one who would someday carry his mantle, occasionally offered small, soft pieces of wisdom, not in grand speeches, but in quiet conversations by the fire. He would speak of listening for God's whisper instead of waiting for dramatic signs, of trusting God's pace rather than rushing ahead, of allowing oneself to rest, to breathe, to receive care when the journey grows heavy. Truths learned not through triumph, but through trembling. And these lessons, though simple, carried the weight of heaven within them. As the seasons turned and the years continued their gentle passing, Elijah's heart grew even more anchored in the peace God had placed within him. He no longer braced himself for fear to return as sharply as it once had, because he had come to understand that God was present even in the trembling, that the Lord did not step away when anxiety tried to rise, that divine compassion did not withdraw when human frailty made itself known. And in this understanding, Elijah found freedom, freedom to breathe without dread, freedom to rest without guilt, freedom to trust that his story would unfold under the careful guidance of a God who saw every part of him with love. There were moments, still, when Elijah remembered the wilderness with surprising clarity, the exhaustion, the fear, the suffocating sense of being overwhelmed. But instead of tightening within him, those memories softened like a distant echo carried on the wind, and each time he remembered, his heart filled with quiet gratitude, because he knew what God had done for him there, how the Lord had met him in a moment that felt like the end, how he had sent an angel to feed him, to touch him, to let him rest without shame, how he had spoken in a whisper instead of a rebuke, how he had breathed hope back into a heart that had nearly gone silent. And Elijah carried this gratitude like a small flame within him, warm and steady, illuminating the truth that God's mercy is never withheld from those whose spirits quake. So let your breath soften now. Let your shoulders release their tension. Let your thoughts slow into a quiet rhythm, like the steady tide against a peaceful shore. For the God who was with Elijah is with you in this very moment, drawing near, speaking softly, surrounding you with a presence that does not leave when fear appears. He is here. He is gentle. He is patient. And he is watching over you with a love that will never let you go. Rest in him. Breathe in his nearness. Let his peace settle over your spirit like a warm cloak in the cool night air, and trust that he will continue to guide you, comfort you, and hold you just as faithfully as he did Elijah, now and always. Elijah's story did not end with the whirlwind, for the peace God wove into his life continued to echo through the ages, settling gently into the hearts of all who heard it. And as we linger in the quiet of his journey, we feel the softness of that truth resting upon us like a warm hand on the shoulder, reminding us that the God who met Elijah in fear is the same God who meets us in our most fragile moments. And even now, as you breathe slowly in the stillness of this night, you are wrapped in the same divine tenderness that carried Elijah through every trembling step. Elisha, watching the chariot of fire rise into the heavens, felt the weight of grief and awe settle together within him. The mantle Elijah had cast upon him now rested in his hands, warm with the memory of their shared days. And though Elijah had been taken up in glory, the peace of his later years remained alive in the young man's heart. For Elijah had shown him that even prophets, even heroes of faith, even those who perform miracles and speak with boldness, can tremble, can grow weary, can stumble into fear. And yet God never abandons them. God never turns away. He meets them in their frailty with compassion, feeds them with care, restores them with whispers. And this understanding became a quiet strength for Elisha as he stepped into the path God had prepared for him. And as we reflect on Elijah's journey from panic to peace, we find our own hearts reflected in the tender arc of his story, because we too know what it feels like to be overwhelmed, to feel suddenly undone by thoughts we cannot control, to collapse inwardly under pressures unseen by others, to wonder if we have reached the end of our strength. And it is in these moments, the moments we fear make us weak, that Elijah's story becomes a soft lantern in our darkness, reminding us that God does not leave us trembling in the wilderness. He comes to where we are. He touches us gently. He offers rest without asking us to first be stronger. He speaks in whispers that calm the storms we cannot quiet ourselves. And maybe right now, your heart is carrying something heavy, a worry that sits deep in your chest, a fear that rises when night falls, a burden that feels larger than your ability to hold it. But hear the truth carried through Elijah's life. God is not asking you to pretend you are unshaken. He is not expecting you to hold everything together on your own. He is not disappointed in your trembling. He is near, closer than the quiet around you, closer than the breath you draw. And he is watching over you with a tenderness more patient than you have ever known. There were nights, long after Elijah was gone, when Elisha would sit beneath the same stars they once traveled under, and he would remember the sound of Elijah's voice, softer in the later years, steadier, touched by the peace God had given him. And in those memories, Elisha would find comfort for his own weary moments. And the same comfort is offered to you now, through the whisper of Scripture, through the gentle rhythm of your breathing, through the quiet assurance that if God sustained Elijah, he will sustain you too. So let the night be a sanctuary around you. Let the hush of this moment wrap softly around your mind. Let your thoughts drift like small boats on calm water, and feel the nearness of God as surely as Elijah felt it beneath the broom tree on the mountain, in the soft companionship of Elisha, and in the radiant moment of his homegoing. The Lord who tended Elijah's tired heart tends yours now. The God who whispered to a trembling prophet whispers into your spirit with the same gentleness, offering rest, offering peace, offering the assurance that you are safe, held, and loved beyond measure. Let yourself settle into that truth. Let it cradle you the way God cradled Elijah when his panic overtook him. Let it ease the tightness in your thoughts, the tension in your shoulders, the heaviness in your breath. God is with you. God is patient with you. God is caring for you in ways seen and unseen. And even if tomorrow brings challenges or uncertainties, he will walk with you through each one, whispering guidance, offering strength, and steadying your heart with a love that never fades. Rest now, breathe gently, and let the peace that carried Elijah through his final days rest upon you like a soft mantle, warming you, calming you, assuring you that God is here and you are not alone, not tonight, not ever. And so the peace that flowed through Elijah's story continues like a gentle river, winding softly into the quiet places of your own heart, a reminder that God, who walked beside his trembling prophet, walks just as tenderly beside you. And as we breathe together in this stillness, we let the weight of that truth settle like warm light drifting slowly across a peaceful room. God is near, nearer than your worries, nearer than your thoughts, nearer than the fear that sometimes wraps itself around your breath. And in this nearness there is no judgment, only compassion, only patience, only the steady love that has carried his children since the beginning of time. Elisha, holding Elijah's mantle after that radiant farewell, felt the lingering warmth of his mentor's journey. He felt the echo of those quiet evenings, the shared stories, the soft wisdom Elijah had gained after being restored by God. And those memories filled him not with sorrow but with courage, because Elijah's life did not simply tell of miracles and fire from heaven. It told of a God who meets his children in their lowest moments and lifts them with tenderness. And Elisha carried that truth into the days ahead, into the people he comforted, into the miracles God worked through his hands. And each time he felt uncertain or overwhelmed, he remembered Elijah's trembling under the broom tree and how God had turned that trembling into a testimony of grace. And in the same way, your own moments of fear, though painful now, are being held by God with the same gentleness. They are not wasted. They are not forgotten. They are not signs of weakness that separate you from his love. They are places where his compassion draws closer, where his whisper becomes clearer, where his presence becomes more deeply known. The way a wound becomes tender before it heals, your heart is being tended by the one who sees every broken place and knows exactly how to mend it. There is a deep comfort in knowing that God never rushed Elijah. He never demanded that the prophet pull himself together. He never shamed him for feeling overwhelmed. Instead, he let Elijah sleep. He fed him. He touched him gently. He guided him step by step, breath by breath, until Elijah's strength returned. And that same God cares for you with the same patience. He does not ask you to be stronger than you are. He simply asks you to rest in his nearness, to allow his presence to hold you, to let his whisper settle where your thoughts feel tangled. Imagine now the quiet desert where Elijah once walked, the soft crunch of sand beneath his feet, the gentle rustle of wind weaving through low desert shrubs, the sky stretching open and wide, the kind of quiet that makes the soul breathe deeper without realizing it. And imagine God walking beside him, steps soft, presence steady, saying nothing loud or urgent, simply being there, offering companionship that soothes the trembling heart. And just as God walked beside Elijah, he walks beside you now, invisible yet unmistakably near, calming your breath, settling your thoughts, easing the restless corners of your spirit. As Elisha began his own journey, he often found himself returning in his mind to those long walks with Elijah, the unhurried pace, the soft conversations, the comfortable silences. And in remembering, he felt strengthened, because Elijah's life showed him that even the anointed, even the chosen, even the strong can have moments when they feel undone, and that God does not love them any less for it. He loves them through it. This truth became Elisha's anchor, and it can become yours as well. You may feel weary tonight. Perhaps your thoughts have been running fast. Perhaps worry has sat too heavily upon your chest. Perhaps you've wondered if you will ever feel fully at peace again. But rest in this gentle truth. God is holding you with the same love that held Elijah. He is not distant from your fear. He is not irritated by your tears. He is not disappointed in your exhaustion. He is close, closer than the silence around you, closer than the pulse beneath your skin. And He is offering you rest that goes deeper than sleep. Rest for your soul, rest for your mind, rest for your trembling places. You are not alone. You have never been alone, and you never will be. The God who met Elijah in his panic meets you here, in this quiet moment, holding you, guarding you, comforting you. And as you drift gently toward rest, let His peace settle into the deepest parts of you, until every lingering worry softens, until every anxious edge fades, until your soul feels held by the One who will never let you go. Rest now, beloved heart. God is here, and His whisper is enough. And so we continue to drift gently through the echo of Elijah's peace, letting his story wash over us like soft waves rolling onto a quiet shore, each moment reminding us that the God who held him holds you just as tenderly. And as you lie here, breathing softly, allowing the night to cradle you, the same divine presence that once whispered into a trembling prophet's heart now whispers into yours. Slow and steady, patient and warm. Elisha, carrying the memory of Elijah like a gentle flame cupped in his hands, learned to walk through life with a deeper reverence for the softness of God. Because Elijah had shown him, through fear, through exhaustion, through the frailty of human emotion, that God's love is not reserved for the brave, nor is His comfort only for the strong. His compassion moves closest when the heart trembles, when the breath quickens, when the soul feels thin and fragile, when worry rises like a quiet storm. And Elisha carried that truth into every home he visited, every person he prayed for, every miracle God performed through him. He carried not only Elijah's mantle, but Elijah's transformation, from panic to peace, from fear to rest, from trembling to quiet trust. And you too carry your own story of trembling, your own nights of worry, your own days when fear felt larger than anything else in your life. But just as Elijah's story did not end in fear, neither will yours, because God is still writing, still shaping, still whispering into the deepest parts of your spirit. And though you may not see the next chapter yet, He sees it clearly. He holds it gently, and He guides you into it with a patience more tender than you can imagine. There is something sacred about knowing that God does not rush the fearful heart. He did not rush Elijah when he collapsed beneath the broom tree. He did not rush him on the mountain when his voice shook as he poured out his sorrow. He did not rush him through the long journey of healing. He allowed Elijah to rest, allowed him to breathe, allowed him to feel, allowed him to simply be held. And that same patient love surrounds you tonight. God is not waiting for you to be stronger before He comforts you. He comforts you now, exactly as you are. Weary or calm, anxious or peaceful, trembling or steady, He is here, completely here, and His nearness carries no conditions. Imagine now Elijah's quiet moments later in life. Imagine him sitting beneath a broad tree as the late afternoon sun draped golden light across the earth. Imagine him listening to the soft hum of insects, the whisper of wind brushing through leaves. Imagine his hands resting lightly in his lap, no longer clenched with fear, no longer trembling with dread. Imagine his breathing slow and even, shaped by years of walking with a God who proved Himself faithful in every valley. And imagine the peace that rested upon Elijah's shoulders like a warm shore, gentle, calm, steady. This is the same peace God offers you, not as a reward, but as a gift. Not because you earned it, but because you are loved. There is a sweetness in knowing that Elijah, who once felt undone by fear, ended his earthly journey wrapped in the presence of God, lifted into glory by divine hands. And if God can carry a trembling prophet from despair to splendor, he can certainly carry you from anxiety to rest, from heaviness to hope, from overwhelm to the quiet assurance that you are deeply, eternally held. And even now, as you breathe softly, your spirit is beginning to feel that truth settle within you, like warm oil soothing the tired places in your mind, like gentle hands calming a racing heartbeat. You may not always feel brave, you may not always feel strong, you may not always feel steady beneath the weight of the world, but none of that changes God's love for you. Elijah was not abandoned when he panicked, and you are not abandoned when fear rises. Elijah was not reprimanded for his exhaustion, and you are not reprimanded for yours. Elijah was not told to stand up before being fed, and neither are you. God meets you in your lowest moments, not after them. He sits beside you when the tears come, not only when they stop. He wraps his presence around you when anxiety tightens your chest, not only when peace returns. Rest in that love now. Let it wrap around you like warm light. Let it calm every anxious place. Let it reassure every uncertain thought. God is here, whispering peace into the places that fear once claimed, holding you the way he once held his trembling prophet, and promising you gently that you are safe, beloved, and never alone. Close your eyes, if they are not yet closed. Soften your breath, and let the God who comforted Elijah comfort you now, fully, deeply, tenderly, until the peace he gives becomes the peace you feel, and your heart rests quietly in his everlasting arms. See? And so we continue, slowly, gently, as if walking through a quiet field at dusk, the air soft, the light tender, every step leading us deeper into the peace that once wrapped itself around Elijah's weary soul. And as we linger here, letting the stillness settle around us, we remember that God's presence is not something loud or forceful. It is a steady hush, a soft nearness, a gentle warmth that surrounds the heart like a comforting embrace. The same nearness that met Elijah in his trembling meets you now, soothing the tired corners of your thoughts. Elisha, growing year by year into the calling God had given him, often felt the memory of Elijah nearby, not as a shadow, but as a quiet strength. He remembered the calm in Elijah's eyes during the later years, the softened edges of a man who had been carried through panic by the hands of a tender God. And in those memories, Elisha found courage, because he knew that if God could restore Elijah from such trembling fear, then God could steady anyone, could steady him, could steady the people he served, could steady every soul that felt overwhelmed by life. And that truth glowed in Elisha's heart like a lantern guiding him through long nights. There were evenings when Elisha would sit beside still water, watching the reflection of the sky ripple faintly across the surface, the fading light turning gold, then rose, then violet as the world quieted around him. And in that hush, he often imagined Elijah sitting beside him once more, listening to the wind, watching the horizon, remembering the God who had whispered peace into his deepest fear. And in that imagining, Elisha felt God's presence settle beside him too, as if heaven itself drew near in the stillness, reminding him that he was held just as gently as Elijah had been. And this same presence draws near to you in this moment. As the night deepens and your breathing softens, God wraps himself around you with a tenderness you do not have to earn, a love you do not have to deserve, a patience that does not fade when your thoughts grow heavy. He is with you, not in the distance, not in the echo, not in some unreachable place, but right here, nearer than the quiet in the room, nearer than the pulse beneath your hand, nearer than your next breath. Elijah's journey teaches us that our moments of panic do not frighten God. They do not push him away. They do not separate us from his compassion. When fear overwhelms you, he moves closer. When anxiety rises in your chest, he whispers more softly. When you feel you cannot go on, he sits beside you in the dust and waits with you until your strength returns. And sometimes his comfort comes as it did for Elijah, in rest, in nourishment, in the simple invitation to breathe. Sometimes it comes through people who walk beside you. Sometimes it comes through quiet moments like this one, where the world slows and God's presence becomes gently undeniable. Imagine now Elijah's final peace, lingering like fragrance in the world after he was taken up in the whirlwind. Imagine that peace drifting through the hills where he once walked, floating through the trees where he once prayed, settling softly in the places where he once trembled. And imagine that same peace reaching across time to find you now, touching your thoughts, calming your spirit, smoothing the worries that have pressed on your heart. Imagine it washing over you like warm rain, gentle and steady, leaving behind only rest. You may have carried many things today: decisions, worries, memories, expectations, questions, unknowns, and some of them may still linger in your mind. But God is not asking you to solve everything tonight. He is not asking you to be stronger than you feel. He is simply inviting you to rest, to breathe, to receive his nearness the way Elijah once did under the open sky, the way Elisha did beside quiet waters, the way every weary heart is invited to rest beneath the softness of God's care. Let yourself feel that care now. Feel the warmth of his presence settling over you like a blanket drawn gently across your shoulders. Feel his peace easing the tightness in your chest. Feel his whisper brushing through your thoughts, quieting the noise, softening the edges of your worries. His voice is not loud. It never needed to be. It is calm, steady, and full of love. You are not alone, beloved heart. Not in your fear, not in your weariness, not in your quiet longing for peace. God sees every part of you, the parts you show and the parts you keep hidden. And he loves you through all of it. He stays beside you through every season. He holds you through every trembling moment. And just as he carried Elijah from panic into peace, he is carrying you now, gently, faithfully, without rushing, without pressure, simply with love. And so we walk a little farther into this quiet night, letting the peace of God settle even more deeply into the tender spaces of your spirit. The world around you softens, the noise fades, and only this gentle awareness remains, that the same God who once stooped low to comfort a trembling prophet is here with you now, nearer than the hush in the air, steady as the breath rising and falling within you. And in his nearness there is no weight, no pressure, no expectation. Only the quiet love that wraps itself around the weary and says, "Rest now, I am here." Elisha, as the years passed, kept returning in memory to the softness he saw rise within Elijah after those hard wilderness days. He remembered the way Elijah would pause to listen before speaking, as though still tuned to the whisper he once heard on Horeb. He remembered the way Elijah's eyes would soften when he spoke of God's mercy, the subtle warmth that came from a heart healed slowly, deeply, gently. And in those memories, Elisha found a calmness that guided him through every storm he faced, because he knew Elijah's strength had not come from himself. No, it had come from the God who remained steady, even when Elijah could not. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson rising in your heart now. The understanding that you do not have to be strong on your own, that you do not have to quiet your own anxiety by force, that you do not have to hold every worry in trembling hands. God is not asking you to carry what He is ready to hold for you. He is not waiting for you to be perfect before He draws near. He is present in your breath, in your thoughts, in the gentle stirring of hope beneath your ribs. He is here in this moment, offering you the same patient love He offered Elijah through every fearful step of his journey. There were nights when Elisha would sit beside a glowing fire, the crackling embers casting soft light on the earth around him, and he would feel the weight of his calling settle heavily in his chest. And in those moments, he would close his eyes and breathe slowly, remembering the way Elijah once breathed after his fear had broken. Slow, steady, as though inhaling God's peace and exhaling the remnants of old panic. And Elisha learned to do the same, to breathe in faith and breathe out fear, to breathe in presence and breathe out worry, to let God be the calm within him, the stillness beneath the surface of every moment. And God offers you that same stillness now, not a stillness you must fabricate, not a calm you must enforce upon yourself, but a quiet that comes from knowing you are completely, tenderly held. Imagine your thoughts drifting like feathers carried on a soft wind. Imagine every worry loosening its grip with each gentle breath. Imagine God's hand resting lightly over your heart, steadying every beat, reminding you with touch alone that you are safe. Elijah's story whispers to you now, saying gently that panic is not the end. Fear is not the whole story. Exhaustion is not a cliff, but a place where God meets you with bread, with water, with rest. A place where He speaks more softly, not less. A place where He proves that His love is not shaken by your trembling. And as you rest here, wrapped in the quiet comfort of this night, that truth settles deeper and deeper into your spirit. God is not distant. God is not impatient. God is not waiting for you to be more resilient. He is simply near, and His nearness is enough. Your breath grows softer now, your mind slowing its pace, your heart settling like a bird folding gently into its nest. And in this soothing quiet, you can feel the tender rhythm of God's presence around you, a warm embrace woven not of words, but of peace, of assurance, of love that reaches you exactly where you are. So rest, beloved heart. Rest in the certainty that the God who carried Elijah from fear into peace is carrying you too. Rest knowing that every trembling moment of your story is held in hands far gentler than your own. Rest in the whisper that breathes softly through this night, telling you again and again, I am here. I am with you. You are safe. You are loved. And so we continue, slowly and softly, as if the night itself were leaning in to listen. The air around you settling into a hush, the world growing tender and still, every sound fading until only the quiet rhythm of your own breath remains. And in that gentle quiet, the presence of God drapes itself over you like a warm shawl, comforting, steady, unhurried. The same presence that held Elijah through panic and exhaustion, through trembling and fear, through the long journey back into peace. And just as God wrapped Elijah in divine compassion, He wraps you in it now, without condition, without hesitation, without end. Elisha even as he grew older and wiser, never forgot the softness he witnessed in Elijah's restored spirit. He remembered how the prophet's steps, once frantic and heavy with fear, had slowed into a peaceful rhythm, how his eyes, once clouded with exhaustion, had begun to shine again with quiet trust, how his voice, once strained with sorrow, had become warm with the calm of someone deeply held by God. And in those memories, Elisha found strength for his own weary days, because he carried within him the living proof that God never abandons a trembling heart, never leaves a soul alone in fear, never turns away from the ones who collapse beneath the weight of life. And tonight, that same truth reaches across time to rest gently on you, reminding you that your moments of trembling do not separate you from God. They draw him closer. Your breath may quicken, your thoughts may swirl, your heart may feel fragile, but none of these things frighten the one who formed you. He is near in your weakness, near in your vulnerability, near in every quiet moment when you whisper, "Lord, I need you." And his answer is always the same gentle whisper Elijah heard on the mountain, "I am here." There were moments when Elisha felt overwhelmed by the weight of his calling, the needs of the people, the uncertainties of each day. And during those times, he would pause, close his eyes, and remember Elijah's healing. He would picture Elijah beneath the broom tree, exhausted and undone. Then he would picture the angel sent by God, touching Elijah gently, offering bread and water, offering rest without demanding anything in return. And in that memory, Elisha's own heart would steady, because he knew that the God who tended Elijah tenderly would tend him too. And that same care is extended to you in this very moment. Imagine now the desert where Elijah once lay, the sand warm beneath him, the sky wide above him, the air still with the quiet of early morning. Imagine God's angel kneeling beside him, not with harshness, not with urgency, but with soft compassion, placing warm bread and cool water at his side. Imagine the gentle touch on his shoulder, the silent assurance that he was not alone. And imagine that same care being offered to you, the warmth of divine presence placed beside your weary heart, the quiet whisper brushing through your thoughts, saying softly, "Rest, breathe, I am with you." You may have carried many worries today, perhaps even many worries for many days. Your thoughts may feel heavy, your spirit tired, your emotions tender. But God is not asking you to push through the exhaustion. He is not expecting you to be stronger than you feel. He is simply inviting you to rest in Him, to let your breath slow, your shoulders loosen, your mind soften into quiet, to let His peace seep into every corner of your being like gentle light filling a dim room. Elijah's story reminds you that the path from fear to peace is not rushed, that healing comes slowly, tenderly, gently, that God meets you where you are and walks with you step by step, even when those steps feel small. He does not ask you to leap. He does not ask you to run. He simply asks you to lean into His presence and let Him hold you. And so in this soft hour of the night, allow your breath to deepen just a little. Allow your thoughts to settle like dust falling quietly to the earth. Allow your heart to feel the steady presence of God, warm, patient, loving, surrounding you on every side. You are safe in His nearness. You are held in His gentleness. You are protected by His peace. Elijah, once trembling beneath the broom tree, ended his earthly life in a chariot of glory, lifted, honored, embraced by God with radiant love. And though your journey looks different, the heart of God toward you is the same. He sees your fear, your fragility, your fatigue, and He meets each one with care, with compassion, with a presence that does not fade when night comes. He stays, he watches, he whispers, he comforts. So rest now. Let the quiet cover you like soft wings. Let God's peace surround you like warm wind in the evening. Let his whisper steady the trembling places inside you. You are not alone. You have never been alone, and you never will be. The God who met Elijah meets you tonight, and his love is enough. And so we move deeper into this gentle night, as if carried on a slow, drifting current of peace. Every breath softer than the last, every thought loosening its hold. And in this quiet, we draw near to the same God who drew near to Elijah, the same God who lifted a weary prophet from the dust and whispered life back into his tired spirit. And as we linger here, the tenderness of his presence begins to wrap around you like a warm blanket, settling over your heart with the calm assurance that you are safe, that you are seen, that you are endlessly loved. Elisha, long after Elijah had been taken up in the whirlwind, often found himself remembering the little things, how Elijah would tilt his head as if listening for God's whisper carried on the wind, how he walked with measured gentleness, no longer rushing from fear, but moving with the slow steadiness of someone who knew he was held, how his voice carried a soft confidence born not from strength, but from surrender, from letting God be the one who restored him, guided him, steadied him. And those memories became like a lamp for Elisha, illuminating the truth that God does his deepest work in the quiet, tender corners of the heart. And perhaps you can feel that same truth settling into you now. God is working gently inside your tired places, not with force, not with pressure, but with a soothing calm that asks nothing of you but to breathe, to rest, to let him be near. Whatever anxieties have tangled themselves around your thoughts, whatever heaviness rests upon your chest, whatever quiet sadness lingers in the folds of your spirit, God sees it all, and he draws close, not away. He gathers you into his presence with the same care he offered Elijah when he felt like he could no longer stand. And in this sacred nearness, you do not have to pretend. You do not have to perform. You do not have to be anything but what you are in this moment. Imagine now Elijah's final peaceful days, the desert wind brushing lightly across his face, the sun warming his shoulders, the whisper of God lingering always at the edge of his thoughts. Imagine the way he must have felt, a man once shaken by fear, now wrapped in divine rest. Imagine the quiet gratitude that filled his heart, knowing that God had carried him through his darkest moment and led him gently into peace. And imagine that same peace settling upon you now, softly, like warm evening light spilling across the ground, illuminating all the places inside you that long for rest. Elisha learned something sacred from Elijah's journey, that fear is not a failure, that trembling is not a sign of lack, that exhaustion is not a reason for shame, but rather an invitation, an opening, a moment when God bends close and whispers, "Let me hold you." And maybe that is what your heart needs tonight, not answers, not strength, not certainty, but simply the reassurance that you can rest in the arms of a God who is endlessly patient with you. Let your breath slow now, as though your lungs were remembering the rhythm of peace. Let your thoughts drift like small boats on a gentle river. Let your heart soften, surrendering the day into hands far steadier than your own. And feel the weight of God's presence around you, warm and quiet, like a soft glow filling the room. Every anxious edge beginning to smooth, every tight place loosening, every worry quieting as though hushed by love itself. You are not alone in this moment. You are not adrift. You are not forgotten. The same God who tended Elijah tends you now. The same God who whispered peace into a trembling prophet is whispering peace into your own spirit. The same God who remained steady through Elijah's fear remains steady through yours. And as you sink deeper into rest, His presence wraps around you like a gentle embrace, soothing, calming, holding you until your heart remembers how deeply cherished you are. Rest now. Breathe softly. Feel the night settle around you like a shelter. And know, truly know, that God is here, whispering love over you, steady as the stars, tender as the quiet. And so we continue, drifting deeper into the softness of this night, as if carried gently on a quiet breeze that knows exactly where your weary places are. And the further we move into this stillness, the more we sense the same tender presence that once surrounded Elijah settling around you now, warm, steady, unhurried. A presence that asks nothing of you but to rest, to breathe, to allow yourself to be held by the God who never grows weary of comforting His children. Elisha, in the years that followed Elijah's radiant departure, often found himself pausing in the middle of his journeys, sometimes on a dusty road, sometimes beneath the shade of a tree, sometimes beside a river, slowly winding its way through the land. And in those pauses, he could almost feel Elijah beside him. Not in a loud or dramatic way, but in the gentle memory of the peace Elijah carried. A peace born from being restored by a God who understood fear, who understood exhaustion, who understood the fragile places of a human heart. And each time Elisha felt that quiet remembrance, his own spirit would settle, as though reminded that he too was held by the same unchanging love. And perhaps you feel something similar now, a soft awareness rising in your spirit, telling you that God is here, not far, not distant, but close enough to hear the faintest whisper of your thoughts, close enough to steady your breath, close enough to calm the quiet trembles of your heart. He is with you the way He was with Elijah, patient, gentle, endlessly compassionate. And even if today felt heavy, even if your mind feels tired, even if your heart feels stretched thin, His presence is large enough to carry every piece of you without strain. There is something profoundly comforting in knowing that God met Elijah not on a mountaintop of victory, but in the low place where he collapsed under the weight of fear. That God approached him not with thunder, but with a whisper, not with commands, but with nourishment, not with pressure, but with rest. And in the same way, God meets you in your humanity, in every breath that feels tangled, in every thought that feels heavy, in every moment when you wish you were stronger, but feel instead like you are unraveling. He meets you there with tenderness, not disappointment, with comfort, not correction, with peace, not pressure. Imagine now, Elijah in those final moments before he was lifted into the heavens, the quiet around him warm and golden, the wind soft on his face, the presence of God enveloping him like a gentle promise fulfilled. Imagine the calm on his features, the rest in his shoulders, the ease in his breath. A man once weighed down by fear, now carried upward in glory, wrapped in the fullness of divine love. And imagine that same love settling over you now, whispering softly through the stillness, inviting you to let go of every burden you've held too tightly. Elisha, watching the chariot rise into the sky, felt awe like a trembling flame in his chest. But beneath that awe was something deeper, peace. The peace of knowing that Elijah's story, once marked by fear, had been rewritten by mercy, restored by tenderness, renewed by the gentle voice of God. And that truth remained with Elisha like a warm ember glowing quietly within him, a reminder that every trembling soul, can be made whole again, that every weary heart can be lifted, that every frightened mind can find rest in the arms of God. And that truth reaches for you now, shaping the quiet around you, softening the edges of your breath, calming the spaces inside you where thoughts have been tangled. God is here with the same love, the same patience, the same whisper that met his prophet long ago. He draws near not because you are strong, but because you are his. Not because you have everything figured out, but because he delights in carrying what you cannot hold. Not because you never fear, but because he never leaves you in fear. So allow yourself to sink a little deeper into rest. Let your breathing soften into a slow, gentle rhythm. Let your shoulders release whatever tension remains. Let your mind drift like leaves floating down a quiet stream, and feel the presence of God swaying around you like a lullaby, soothing, steadying, comforting every part of you, even the parts you rarely speak of, even the parts you rarely understand. Elijah's story is a testament that trembling cannot separate you from divine love, that fear cannot silence God's whisper, that exhaustion cannot make him turn away. And as the night deepens around you, that truth settles like a warm, soothing balm over your spirit, reminding you that you are loved dearly, endlessly, eternally. Rest now, beloved heart. Let the peace that held Elijah hold you too. Let the whisper of God cradle your thoughts, and let the soft arms of this night wrap you in calm until sleep comes gently to your side. And so we continue, drifting even further into this gentle river of quiet, each breath slower, each thought softer, each moment more deeply wrapped in the stillness of God's presence. And as you rest within this unfolding calm, the same tenderness that once surrounded Elijah now settles around you like a warm embrace, steady, constant, patient, the kind of nearness that asks nothing of you but to simply be, to simply breathe, to simply exist within the love of the one who knows your heart more intimately than you know it yourself. Elisha, carrying Elijah's mantle across the years, found that his mentor's gentleness lingered in unexpected ways. Sometimes in the way he approached others with patience, sometimes in the way he paused before speaking, listening for God's whisper in the quiet spaces of the soul, sometimes in the way his own heart softened toward the broken, the anxious, the weary. Because Elijah had shown him that even the greatest of God's servants could tremble, even the strongest hearts could falter, even prophets could feel fear coil inside them like a tightening fist. And he had also seen how God came close in those moments, closer than breath, ready to comfort, ready to restore, ready to whisper peace where panic once echoed. And perhaps tonight you feel a small echo of that same truth settling over you, the realization that God does not require your strength before he offers his, that he does not demand calmness before he grants peace, that he does not wait for your thoughts to be untangled before he draws near. He comes to you exactly as you are, tired or steady, fearful or peaceful, tangled or quiet, and he sits beside you with the tenderness of someone who understands every delicate place within your spirit. There were nights when Elisha felt the weight of worry pressing gently against his thoughts. Nights when the world felt larger than he could manage, when the responsibilities before him felt too heavy for a single pair of hands. And in those moments, he would remember Elijah's trembling beneath the broom tree. He would remember how God fed him, touched him, spoke to him, but never hurried him, never scolded him, never shamed him. And those memories became a balm for Elisha's own heart, reminding him that God's love does not waver when our strength does. Imagine now that same love resting upon you like warm light, spreading slowly through a peaceful room. Imagine God's presence wrapping around your mind, smoothing the furrowed places, softening the edges of worry. Imagine His hand resting lightly over your heart, steadying each beat, whispering through the quiet, "You are safe. I am here. Let yourself rest." And allow those words to move through you as gently as breath, easing the spaces where fear once settled. Elijah's story reminds us that God's voice is rarely found in the noise or the chaos. It is found in the whisper, the soft, almost silent stirring that brushes gently against the soul, the whisper that carries comfort rather than commands, the whisper that lifts rather than pushes, the whisper that meets you not at your best, but in the tender, vulnerable places you rarely show to anyone. And that whisper is here now, warm and gentle, weaving peace through your thoughts like a soft thread of gold. Let your breathing deepen just a little. Let your shoulders sink a little further into rest. Let the night cradle you the way a mother cradles a sleeping child, and feel the presence of God surrounding you with quiet, protective love. He is not in a hurry. He does not rush the healing of your heart. He moves slowly, tenderly, the way someone would soothe a frightened child or calm a trembling pet. He knows your fears, and instead of turning away, He steps closer, closer still, until the fear loses its power simply because you are no longer facing it alone. Elisha learned through Elijah's life that God is not only the God of miracles and fire, He is the God of rest, of quiet, of slow, gentle mending. And that truth became a soft anchor in his spirit. And tonight it can become an anchor in yours as well. A reminder that you are held even when you tremble, loved even when you feel unsure, treasured even when your thoughts feel tangled, and completely safe in the presence of a God whose kindness outlasts every fearful moment you will ever experience. So let your thoughts drift now, like petals floating on a still pond. Let every worry soften as though wrapped in warm hands. Let every anxious whisper fade beneath the gentle hum of God's nearness, and feel yourself sinking into a deeper peace, the kind that does not demand anything from you, but simply welcomes you into rest. And as you drift further towards sleep, feel that love surrounding you on every side, steady as the earth beneath you, soft as the sky above you, warm as the breath in your lungs. Rest now, beloved one. The God who held Elijah holds you too, gently, completely, eternally. And so we continue, drifting deeper into this gentle stream of peace, as though the night itself is carrying you slowly toward rest. Every breath softening, every thought loosening, every moment held tenderly in the quiet hands of God. And in this soothing stillness, the same presence that once whispered to Elijah now settles beside you, close enough to steady your heartbeat, close enough to calm the trembling edges of your spirit, close enough to remind you with love alone that you are safe, deeply safe, in His nearness. Elisha, as the years unfolded gently around him, carried Elijah's story not as a burden, but as a blessing, a treasured testimony of how God moves with unimaginable tenderness toward those who struggle, how He steps toward, not away, from the weary ones, how He listens to the trembling voice without frustration, how He comforts the anxious heart without judgment, how He restores the fearful soul without rushing the process. And as Elisha remembered these things, he understood something sacred, that the gentleness of God is not a small thing. It is not a soft corner in a harsh world. It is the very heart of his love, the way he chooses to heal, to hold, to guide. And perhaps you can feel that gentleness resting over you now, like warm, quiet light spreading slowly across your chest, like a soft hand smoothing the creases of your thoughts, like the calm that fills a room when all has finally settled and the heart is allowed to breathe freely. God is offering you this rest, the same rest he gave Elijah when fear had drained him completely, when his strength had collapsed into dust, when his courage had slipped away like water into sand. God did not shame him. He nourished him. He did not demand action. He offered sleep. He did not ask for more faith. He gave comfort. And that is what he offers you now, in this very moment. There were evenings when Elisha would watch the sun sink low behind the distant hills, the sky blazing gold and amber before melting into soft twilight. And in that beautiful hush, he felt something familiar, a peace he had once seen settle on Elijah's face in the later years, a calm that seemed to glow from a heart touched deeply by God. And in those memories, Elisha found his own rest, knowing that peace was not a reward for the strong, but a gift for the weary, a gift for those honest enough to admit they need God to hold them. Imagine now that same twilight spreading softly around you. Imagine its warm colors settling gently upon your shoulders. Imagine the air cooling with the quiet promise of night, the world slowing until only the steady rhythm of peace remains. And imagine God's whisper moving through that quiet like a soft breeze, brushing against your spirit with words too tender for the ear, but perfectly suited for the heart. Words that say, "You are not alone. You are not forgotten. I am with you. Rest." Elijah's healing was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was slow, quiet, almost delicate, like a small flame rekindling in the safety of cupped hands. And perhaps your healing feels the same, unhurried, subtle, gently unfolding in ways you can sense but not always name. And that is holy. That is enough. God is not expecting you to leap into joy. He is simply offering you the next breath, the next moment of calm, the next whisper of comfort. And with each small step, his peace sinks a little deeper into the places where your heart has been tired. Let your breathing settle into a soft, even rhythm. Imagine each inhale drawing in quiet light. Imagine each exhale releasing the weight of the day. Feel your body sinking gently into rest, as though the earth itself is cradling you. Feel the tension melting slowly from your shoulders, the tightness loosening from your chest, the worry uncoiling from your mind. This is what it feels like to be held by God, not forced into peace, but guided tenderly toward it, like a child led by the hand into a place of safety. Elisha understood that God's whisper was not just for Elijah. It was for everyone who has ever feared, ever trembled, ever sighed beneath the weight of life. And that means it is for you, for your tiredness, for your unspoken concerns, for the quiet ache you carry in your spirit. He hears it all. He understands it all. And he holds you with the same compassion that held his prophet so long ago. So let yourself sink further into this quiet. Let every breath be a step deeper into rest. Let your thoughts drift away like soft clouds crossing a night sky, and feel God's presence wrapping around you in the gentlest embrace. Warm, protective, tender, the kind of embrace that lets the heart finally loosen, the mind finally soften, the body finally rest. You are safe, profoundly safe, in the presence of the God who never leaves his children trembling alone. The God who whispered peace into Elijah's fear. The God who steadied Elisha's heart. The God who is holding you now, whispering softly, lovingly, endlessly. And so we continue, gently, slowly, as though the night itself has drawn a soft curtain around you, creating a sacred quiet, a peaceful shelter where nothing is demanded, nothing is rushed, nothing is expected, except that you simply rest. And here, within this tender stillness, the same God who once met Elijah in his trembling now rests beside you, steady and warm, offering comfort that sinks deeper than thought, deeper than breath, deeper than fear. Elisha lived many years after Elijah was taken into glory, and though his path carried its own challenges, its own trials, its own moments of weight, he never forgot the lesson hidden in his mentor's trembling. He never forgot that God draws near to the fragile, that God bends low to comfort the weary, that God's compassion is most clearly seen when a heart is tired, not when it appears strong. And because he remembered this, Elisha walked through his own life with a gentleness shaped by the tenderness God had shown Elijah. He spoke more softly, listened more deeply, carried others with kindness, because he had witnessed God carry a trembling prophet so lovingly. And in the same way, perhaps your own heart is learning, slowly, quietly, that God is not disappointed in your fragility, that he is not surprised by your moments of fear, that he is not burdened by your weariness. Instead, he leans in closer, the way a loving friend leans toward a trembling child, the way a shepherd draws near to a lamb unsettled by the night. He is with you in a way that feels like warmth settling over your spirit, like peace that doesn't need to be earned, like love that remains even when your thoughts feel unsteady. Elisha often paused at sunset, watching the world soften under the glow of fading light, and in those twilight pauses, he felt the softness of God's presence wash over him, the same softness he had once seen settle on Elijah's face after God restored him from fear. And that twilight peace became for Elisha a reminder that God's healing is never forced, never rushed, never harsh. It is gentle, like evening light warming the earth before nightfall. And maybe you can feel that same gentle healing moving through you now, a warmth spreading slowly through your heart, easing the places that have carried too much for too long. Imagine now the quiet landscape where Elijah once walked in his restored days, the quiet paths where the sun stretched long shadows across the ground, the soft wind threading through the trees, the sky washed in the pastel colors of dusk. Imagine him breathing easily there, each inhale a reminder that panic no longer held his heart, each exhale a release of the burdens he had once believed too heavy to bear. Imagine him walking without hurry, without fear, without the sharp sting of anxiety in his chest, only peace, only the quiet companionship of God beside him. And imagine that same peace beginning to settle on you now. Imagine it flowing gently over your shoulders, across your chest, down the center of your being, like warm oil poured slowly from heaven. Imagine God's whisper moving softly through your thoughts, brushing aside the noise, smoothing the fearful edges, calming the whispers of worry. His voice not loud, not insistent, but gentle, like a soft wind through tall grass, like a flicker of warm candlelight dancing across a still room, like breath itself. You do not need to be strong in this moment. You do not need to hold anything together. You do not need to push yourself forward. God is here to hold you. God is here to breathe peace into you. God is here to give you rest where your strength has worn thin. He is the same God who touched Elijah gently on the shoulder when the prophet felt too broken to stand. He is the same God who spoke tenderly to him when fear clouded his vision. He is the same God who provided food, water, and sleep instead of demands or expectations. And He is the same God sitting quietly beside you now, touching your weary heart with the same compassion. Elijah's story is not just a story of miracles or fire or courage. It is a story of fear met with compassion, weakness met with nourishment, panic met with presence. And that same story is unfolding in you tonight as God draws near to your trembling places with endless tenderness. So rest now. Let the quiet carry you. Wipe it down. Let God's love enfold you. And let the peace that once held Elijah hold you softly, steadily, completely. Rest, beloved heart. You are safe. You are loved. And God is here. And so we continue deeper still into this sanctuary of silence, where the night has gentled itself around you, as though heaven has lowered its voice to match the softness of your breathing. And here, in this sacred hush, God's presence rests beside you like a warm shadow, steady and tender. The same presence that once wrapped itself around Elijah when his heart trembled and his strength faded. The same presence that whispered to him in the quiet cave, that nourished him beneath the broom tree, that walked with him through every fragile step of his healing. And now that same holy nearness surrounds you, holding your tired spirit with infinite patience. Elisha, as the seasons continued to turn, often carried Elijah's memory the way one carries a soft melody, always there, always comforting, always rising in the background of thought. And each time he remembered Elijah's trembling days, he did not remember weakness. He remembered God's tenderness, the bread warm on the stone, the water cool against parched lips, the angel's gentle touch, the whisper softer than any storm. And from these memories, Elisha learned that God never abandons the hearts that shake, that the Lord does not measure strength by the absence of fear, but by the willingness to lean into His love even when fear whispers loudly. Perhaps you feel some of that truth settling into your spirit now. The truth that God's nearness does not depend on your calm, that His love does not waver when your thoughts tremble, that His gentle presence remains with you through every rise and fall of your breath. He is with you in the same intimate way He was with Elijah, quiet enough to soothe, close enough to steady, patient enough to wait with you as long as you need. There were evenings when Elisha would sit alone, the sky stretched above him like a dark, velvet canopy sprinkled with stars. And in that sacred quiet, he would remember how Elijah had once thought his story was over, how fear had whispered that he was alone, finished, forgotten, how exhaustion had convinced him that his purpose had slipped away, and how God had rewritten that sorrow into hope, that panic into peace, that loneliness into companionship. And in remembering, Elisha found comfort for himself, because he knew that the same God who restored Elijah would restore him too, in every weary moment, in every trembling breath. Imagine now the God who whispered to Elijah whispering to you. Imagine Him leaning close, His voice warm as a soft wind brushing across your spirit, His words settling deeper than any sound your ears could hold. Imagine Him saying gently, "I see you. I know you. I am here." Imagine that whisper soothing every unsettled thought, smoothing every crease of worry, warming every cold place within your heart. This is how God comforts, quietly, tenderly, without rush or pressure, simply by being near. Elijah's healing came not in a single moment, but through many gentle ones. Rest, nourishment, silence, companionship, whisper soft guidance. And these are the same ways God is healing you now. Slowly, kindly, step by step. Not demanding sudden strength, not insisting on immediate peace, but offering you comfort that seeps gradually into the deepest places of your spirit, making your breath softer, your mind quieter, your heart steadier. Let your breathing slow again. Imagine each inhale drawing in the warmth of God's love. Imagine each exhale releasing a small piece of the weight you've carried today. Feel your body settling more deeply into rest, as though the very ground were holding you with gentle hands. Feel every muscle softening, every thought loosening its grip, every tired place in your chest slowly unwinding. You are not alone in this night. You are not forgotten. You are not lost in the shadows of your own thoughts. The God who stayed beside Elijah stays beside you with that same unwavering devotion. And even now, in the quiet spaces of your spirit, He is whispering comfort, whispering strength, whispering peace that does not depend on anything you do or fail to do. His love is enough to hold you through the night. There were moments when Elisha faced storms, both around him and within him. And in those moments, he would remember Elijah's journey from panic to peace. And that memory reminded him that God does not grow weary of comforting His children, that the Lord does not tire of whispering reassurance into trembling hearts, that He does not withdraw when fear rises, but steps even closer. And that truth strengthened Elisha in ways nothing else could, and that truth is strengthening you now, whether you feel it clearly or only sense it like a soft warmth beneath your ribs.